Be a lot of eyes on the Super Bowl. Let's bring in Jim Barker, our football analyst, who can answer questions of all leagues of football. Hey, Jim, happy Friday to you. And let's start with the Super Bowl 58, if you don't mind. I got to say, you thought the Ravens would be there. Didn't happen. So how do you feel about this matchup?
Well, I'll say this. I'm never picking against Patrick Mahomes again. The guy is magic. There's something about him. I was watching that game and thinking, what an idiot I was to think Baltimore, with the MVP, would beat Mahomes in a game that mattered. And, it was bizarre watching that game, even from the beginning when they had the issue with the kicker and all of that. It was almost like Baltimore, and I saw this a lot when I was at lower levels. I started out in Division III, actually high school, in Pop Warner. I started out coaching Pop Warner football. And you used to see it a lot down there. When you had a team that was trying to become really good, you were going to not get intimidated. And you were going to go in there and you were going to, talk smack and push and do the things that are... Well, that Baltimore team took three major penalties that I thought hurt them badly in the first half. To go on top of the little kicking escapade. And it just like Kansas City was just never worried. And it's because that's how their quarterback is. I saw Lamar Jackson get upset after he threw that interception, like throw his helmet on the side. You don't see that out of Patrick Mahomes. He just knows next series is going to happen. And again, San Francisco may be favored by 20. I'm not picking against Patrick Mahomes.
So you got them to win the Super Bowl? I do. But does that carry over to next Sunday? Yeah, I know. Well, listen, I said I've got him to win too against San Francisco in the Super Bowl. The line is 1, though. It's very narrow. But what about the argument that they're saying he's the greatest NFL quarterback of all time, just based on how good he is right now? I feel I think it's disrespectful to the other guys that have won. I think it's putting too much pressure on him. I don't like the talk. How do you feel about it?
I think it bothers him zero. I don't think that kind of stuff bothers him at all. I think that's what media people we do. You talk about, is this the greatest guy of all time? Is this the greatest team of all time? Is this these guys are going to their 4th Super Bowl out of 5 years. That doesn't just happen. That happens with great coaching, continuity, and a guy like Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. So, again, all that stuff's premature, and I don't think it's not even worth talking about. It's like, enjoy this guy for what he is. I mean, he could anytime. The guy's made enough money. What does he make? $500 a year? Something stupid. He signed a $1 billion contract or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. He could stop playing anytime. I mean, the guy he's on television all the time. You see him more than anybody. He and his partner Kelsey there. So again, that stuff just doesn't matter. Enjoy what you're seeing out of him. And it's all those little things. It's when you got to have a play, he makes the play. Again, I look at Brock Purdy and I look at him, and who's Brock Purdy going to be? Maybe 5 years from now, he's got the 49ers in 5 straight Super Bowls, and we're talking about him in the same breath with Mahomes. We're not right now. We just flat aren't. Patrick Mahomes is a special entity, and you can talk about MVPs and all those things. I'll take him over anybody because he's going to win games when he has to.
I appreciate that, and you're right. It's a media thing versus the football people don't even talk about that or think about it. You're right. And speaking of that, off the field, Belichick is not going to coach in 2024, and who knows if he ever will again. That's another debate that's raging here right now, is that he can't coach today's player. His ways wouldn't work. Do you go along with that?
No, that's not. It doesn't have anything to do with today's player. And I mean, yeah, there's a different kind of coach now, that the DeMeco Ryans and the energetic young coach that communicate with players can work great. But that doesn't mean Andy Reid, who's been in the league, Andy Reid replaced me at San Francisco State in 1983. So he's been around a long time. And, it doesn't mean that those guys can't coach anymore. I mean, does that mean you need to take a young guy over an Andy Reid? Again, Bill Belichick, there probably wasn't the right team for him, and that's understandable. As an ownership group, you have to understand what you're getting. Again, I don't know what he asked for, and but if you can coach, you can coach. And that guy has been in pro football long enough that when he stands in front of the room, players are going to listen. And when it comes down to it, players want to keep their jobs first and win. Those are the two things. Because if they win, they all get rewarded. But their number one thing is keeping their job. And if Belichick tells them to do something, they're going to do it the same as they are if DeMeco Ryans asks them to do it. I mean, you're talking about two separate, different kinds of guys. They both can work in their own environment. Again, I see him. I mean, what a natural in you're wearing the shirt. If Mike McCarthy gets off to a rough start, and with Dak Prescott, that's always a possibility. Bill Belichick could go in there to try to clean it up and, throw some intimidation around. It's a lot like Don Matthews. The thing that impressed me about Belichick, Don would make his run for about 4 or 5 years, and then he would move on. He just seemed to always be a step ahead. And Belichick never did that. He stayed and weathered the storm. Now, having Brady there all those years helped. But that's what's tough to do. And Al Davis when John Madden left after 10 years, and Al Davis said 10 years is what a guy's length should be in an organization. Any more than that, and he's going to lose some kind of edge. And I kind of believe in that. But again, Bill Belichick, none of that mattered. I would take him as my coach any day. If I was an owner, it would be no problem, because I know when he stands in front of that room, those players are going to be tuned in. And that's the key to today's game, is tuning in the players and get them motivated to play. And if they know that, that was Don's magic, was they knew if they didn't play, he had a guy right behind him ready to step in and go. And we never had guys get hurt because they knew Don's going to play. Well, Belichick's got a little of that same mojo of, you don't want to be here? Great. We're going to bring somebody in who fits the way we want it done. So, again, I don't buy into any of that stuff. Again, I'm an old coach. You're asking an old coach if an old coach thinks old coaches are done.
How about that?
Hey, by the way, we got questions from viewers that I'll get to in a moment. I got one last one for Jim, and hopefully he can stay with us for another segment after Jim.
Sure.
I'm just going to ask you, appreciate it. But you've won 5 Grey Cups. I've broadcast 4 Grey Cups. I'm going to Super Bowl next week. We'll be broadcasting from Radio Row. I don't know if I'll have a chance to ask you this next week. Championship week, Flutie said it. I don't care if it's Grey Cup or Super Bowl. He goes, they're the same. The concepts are the same. They're different than the regular season. They're different than even playoff games. Championship games are different, right? What's been your experience that way? And how do you need to approach it differently as a coach and a GM?
I can tell you that experience helps. A coach with experience helps. They understand the whole. I can remember Don Matthews, before the playoffs ever start, would have the Grey Cup week done. So there would be everybody would already have all their tickets, everything they needed to have done was done by front office things, so the players could stay focused. The hardest thing is keeping players focused. You want them to enjoy the week, but they need to stay focused on game plan, on what you're doing, on those kinds of things. And again, there's a lot of distractions, and when you have a young team, sometimes that can be tough. I noticed a big difference when I went in with Hamilton. The one year we didn't win, we were a very young team and won 15 games and went in as the favorites. And again, it was in Calgary. It was in the West. There's a lot of distractions, and that's where I think Kansas City has such a huge advantage this week. Just because they've been to 4 of the last 5. They've got a group of guys that are there that know what it takes to win. They expect to win. Again, I think that's just a huge advantage over a San Francisco team that, they have a young quarterback who hasn't been to a Super Bowl. He's won a lot of big games and fine young player. But again, their leader has never been there. They've got a lot of younger players. So again, I think that's a huge advantage for Kansas City in that they've been there. They have a coaching staff that's been there. They know how to deal with the distractions. And the distractions are going to be like they've never been in Las Vegas. Las Vegas creates a complete different distraction than any of the other places they go. My daughter, she's a pit boss at the Bellagio, and she said, tickets, you can't get a ticket in the rafters for less than $6,000. She said, if you want to sit and be able to see something, it's going to cost you $40,000 to $50,000. And there is so many things going on in town. The players are it's going to be a tough. Again, I don't know where players are staying, but that's going to be a tough deal to keep players focused.
I'm laughing because this is my first year on the inside of the NFL media thing. So I've got all the info on where they're practicing, where they're staying, when the media availabilities are, and I'll just say one of the teams are staying on the strip, and I'm like, I don't know if I'd do that, but whatever. They're not dumb. I don't think it's an oversight. We're gonna take a break here. We'll come back with the CFL questions, but I'm gonna get your number, Jim, from our guy Joe, and I want to go visit your daughter at the Bellagio. And I'll tell you what, I'm getting in early next Wednesday, and I got all day till I can check into my hotel. So I want to find out when she's working. I want to go say hey from your friend. Let's please bring Jim Barker back in. He is our most popular guest that we have on here. The viewers love him, even though he doesn't want to be known as a media guy. Not offended at all, Jim, that you don't want to be known as a media guy. Jeff in Yorkton writes in, and he says, Rod, question for Jim. Should a running back in the CFL be paid more than a star receiver? Neat article on 3 Down about Andrew Harris and William Stanback winning the last 4 cups. If you saw it, Andrew Harris is saying, why are the receivers getting all the money? We're doing all the work and have all the touches. Do you want to take a stab at that one?
Well, a lot of it comes down to, as you look at what happened. For example, Andrew never made the money he probably should have made. Brady Oliveira is probably going to get paid over $200,000 this year. The problem comes in that running backs, high injury rate, their longevity isn't what, say, a receiver could be. Again, I'm not big on receivers getting like what they're getting nowadays, 280, 300, over 300,000 for Eugene Lewis. And I think Kenny Lawler's right at 285 or something along those lines. Again, will Brady Oliveira, I'm guessing he's going to come in around the 220 to 230 range. I don't know. It's an interesting question because a great running back, and the problem with a Canadian running back like an Andrew Harris, is you have to have a good enough guy behind him to back him up in order to make that a true ratio change. And there aren't a lot of teams. Johnny Augustine stepped in and did that for Winnipeg. But they were fortunate in that Brady never got hurt. But running backs notoriously are going to get hurt. I mean, you look at Kadeem Carey. I mean, his trade or his value has gone down because he's been hurt quite a bit the last couple of years. And when running backs miss games, now their replacement's going to be, because you don't have huge rosters in the CFL, he's going to cost you to keep a real good backup around. So I think that's why they don't make the same kind of money. I think the NFL, it trickles down from the NFL. The NFL guys don't make a lot of money, and there's a lot of running backs, quality running backs out there. And every year you're going to see a couple come into the NFL or into the CFL, and it's going to be, wow, that kid's really good. And that's going to happen because of what happens trickle down from the NFL, where they also undervalue running backs for the same reason. The biggest thing is the longevity. I talked to Bill Parcells about this when I first got was becoming a GM. And he said the problem with running backs is you may have them at their best for 2 years, maybe. And that's going to be it. And you're going to have to move on from them. So to invest a lot in that position doesn't make sense. And that made sense to me. When he told me that, it made sense to me. So, again, I think that I don't know if that answers the question, Rod, but that would be the quick answer.
It's your answer. So that's all that matters. I was smiling when you brought up Parcells because I was in Jupiter last weekend at a sandwich restaurant, a sub shop. And I said, Parcells ever come in here? And the owner goes, no, but oddly Belichick has. And he points to a photo on the wall of him and Belichick eating a sub that he made. So I don't think he's too far from Parcells' house, oddly enough. But anyways, Alan in Saskatoon says, hey, Jim, do you think Dalton Schoen and Brady Oliveira stay in Winnipeg? Milt, we all know Milt, Stiegel says they can't afford both. What do you think?
I agree with Milt. I don't think they keep either one of them. Kenny Lawler gets a big bump, and they're paying Dembski a lot of money for what he does. So I think it's going to be difficult to keep both. I think Schoen they have the best chance to get back because I think his value, because of his injury last year and what he does, his value is going to come down more than Brady. I think Brady's going to either be in Toronto if they choose to move on from A.J. Ouellette, which I think is a big problem for them, just because of there's a little bit of identity with A.J. Ouellette in Toronto. And for them to move to Brady, who is, a Canadian, and they have Danny Adeboye, who's ready to play behind him. I mean, they have a tailor-made situation for Brady. But again, I think BC is a logical place for Brady, where they take the bets money and they give it to Brady and where they change their ratio to the offense. Again, all just speculation, nothing backing it up. Stuff that I believe and I think Brady will end up either in Toronto or in BC. And I think Schoen's a different one. Montreal makes sense for Schoen because they lost Austin Mack, and that makes sense for him. But there's not a lot of teams that are going to be able to pay a ton of money for a receiver that he's been great his 2 years in that system. You take receivers out of a system or out of a place they're comfortable, it rarely works. I mean, they took Lawler out of Winnipeg in Edmonton, and he went 1 year, and it was a bit of a wash. Eugene Marshall goes to Edmonton, didn't have a great year, got hurt, and so I just think it's just such a risk. Those high end guys. Now with Oliveira, you get what you get. He's tough. He's been healthy. All those things, but we'll see what happens.
From B. Henderson in Winnipeg says, Jim, do you think Chris Streveler steps right back into the Bomber role like he never left? And also, will Winnipeg make a fifth straight Grey Cup? A two-parter from B. Henderson.
Well, I love them getting Chris Streveler. I think he's made for that market. I think he's great for the CFL. The respect he has. He'll eventually be a starter. I think he'll fit in perfectly doing what they want him to do behind Zach. Zach, who knows how many more years he's going to play, but now with Streveler there, they're in good shape because I think he's only 29 or 30 years old. So, again, I think that's a great move. Will Winnipeg be back there? Let's wait till after free agency and I can look at their roster completely. Obviously, they're going to be a favorite to be back. But what's going to happen with Jeffcoat and Taylor and all the guys that they could lose on their defense? Big Hill, is he going to come back? There's just so many big question marks. You got to wait till after free agency. There was an interesting trade I'd love to talk about for a second with Toronto giving Jordan Williams to Hamilton, a rival. I mean, it's one thing to give a player away because, salary or whatever, but they paid him $35,000 on January 1. And then basically when you look at that trade, you can look at the draft picks each team got, and the draft picks are an interesting trade. Move up 2 in the first. So you move up from 7 to 5. This is what Toronto did. And Hamilton moved from 5 to 7. But Hamilton gets a second round pick and Toronto gets 2 third-round picks. Well, in G, and then Hamilton gets a 4th round pick. Well, in GM talk, you sit over lunch for an hour and a half and talk about who wins that over the picks. And you're going to have it's going to be a 50-50 pick on who wins, moving up 2 spaces, but giving up a set, blah, blah, blah. But then you throw Jordan Williams in, who we basically last year when I was there, we gave up a first-round pick straight for him. Felt he was a starter, a guy who has proven he can play in the league. You pay him $35,000, and then you just kind of hand him to Hamilton, who now can really do some things with their ratio. I hear heavy rumor they're going hard on Matthew Betts. Will that happen? I doubt it. You never know. But with Jordan Williams there, between he and Stavros at free safety, they have 2 on defense now. And Toronto just kind of gave it to them. It was surprising. You never know why they make a trade. Maybe Enoch Mwamba's coming back. There's all kinds of reasons that I'm not privy to, because I don't ask those kind of questions, because if I ask and they tell me, I can't talk about them on your show. And I love being able to talk about
You don't want to know.
So
you don't want to know.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it's all is all just me speculating. And I found that trade fascinating, that especially because it was Hamilton and what it does for their ratio, and then what it does to Toronto, who now has a major problem because on defense, Robbie Smith, who I think is the best in the league at being a backup defensive end special teams player, when he started for us when I was there, our special teams weren't as good. Our defense, nothing was as good. And I just think they're going to want to play Costigan and Flo at defensive ends and keep Robbie there, which means they have only one Mechie's the only guy on defense they have, which means playing 3 Canadian receivers to go with the 3 offensive linemen if they don't get Brady. Now, that's one of the things that made me think they were going to go after Brady hard, because that they can then change their ratio back and take care of it. And that trade started my whole thinking about Brady going possibly to Toronto. It's beautiful,
How
Rod.
about
that? Yeah, I know it is for GMs, as you say. Jim, we are out of time. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend and enjoy Super Bowl.
Yeah, give me a call about Vegas. I'll give you all the best spots.
I will. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Our football analyst, Jim Bark.